Update on the ground in Kenya.
So the total.
Well, good morning, Alicia. Certainly when you come into here to the tele center, you see that security has also been beefed up. Quite a number of security officials outside the tele center as well as inside the tele center, which almost creates the impression that today could be the day that the results are announced. However, though, the IEBC is not clear on when those results will be announced. However, the announcement that we do expect from the IEBC chairperson Chibukati today is what will happen to the four counties where voting has been suspended. These include Kisumu, one of the counties that we visited yesterday. Remember that during the day of election and even the day before that, those four counties had been marred by violent protests, which has also turned fatal. And we've heard from the international, we've heard from Amnesty International accusing the police of using excessive force. And in that exclusive interview that Sarah Kimani had earlier on with Raila Odinga, the leader of NASA, he also spoke about this excessive force that the police has deployed, that the police have been meting out against these young protesters, he says. And when Sarah asked him about some accusing him of inciting violence, and he said that his intention is just to show fellow Kenyans what constitutionalism means. And one of those narratives that he's trying to create is that the National Super Alliance, this is NASA now, he has indicated that NASA will become a resistance movement, and that resistance movement, he says, will not be taking up arms. However, though, it will be carrying out civil disobedience to put pressure on the government to ensure that there is a rerun. So this will be the third rerun that Raila Odinga is seeking in these elections. He says that within 90 days there must be a rerun of the elections. When asked about the money that has already been spent, the billions of rands that have already been spent on the two elections, including this one, he said that money, there was no need actually to use so much money. And had Kenyatta previously agreed to meet with him and agree to the reforms that NASA was seeking in the IEBC, he could have lost, and he would have accepted that loss, which is a concession, I guess, from his side, that the outcome of those elections would have been. However, though, they are pushing for reform of the IEBC. He also accused Kenyatta, as well as the current regime, of pushing for a judicial coup d'etat. He says that the judiciary has been influenced, and this is what Kenyatta and the current regime is trying to push.
All right, now, Aldrin, take us through what the IEBC has said. I mean, we do know that there's been a lot of controversy going into these elections. I mean, at some stage, they were even saying they don't have the manpower, they don't have the resources to deliver free and fair elections. Talk to us about the observer missions. What are they saying? And also the IEBC, do they see this election as being free and fair? Can they declare this election as being free and fair proudly when it comes to announcing those results, be it anytime soon or this coming week?
It will be a very difficult announcement to make, to say whether these elections have been free and fair. Quite disturbing is ahead of the elections, the chairperson Chibukati made the announcement that he can't guarantee that the elections will be free, fair and credible, and that has been a hot contention. And if you look at the statements by various electoral observers who are here, the AU being very careful at this moment. Thabo Mbeki saying earlier on, who's leading the AU Electoral Commission observer mission, saying that they won't pronounce at this point. It is a bit too early to pronounce. Some even being skeptical on giving interviews, including the EU, the European Union's Electoral Observer Commission head, Mariki. But in an interview that she seems to have given to a Dutch media house, which has been loosely translated, she indicates in that interview that these elections have already failed. And you'd remember that during the first run of these elections, during August the 8th, it was the EU that raised concerns that said that due to the various reforms of the Constitution and what the Constitution demands of the IEBC hasn't been able to prepare enough back for the August 8th elections, and this time around as well. And when we tried to confirm this interview with the EU, they said at this point they won't be giving any other interviews or even to verify what Mareki has said to this Dutch media house. So people are a bit skeptical at this moment. One can only consider the level of skepticism that is happening here in Kenya. And I'm going to try and step out of shot just to give you an indication. Oh, well, he is done. That was an IEBC official who was giving the results as they've been trickling in. There has been a lot of pressure on the IEBC to ensure that these results are rigorously tested and verified, and that's why this process has been so slow, because if you look at the August 8 elections, there were about 5 ballots that were being cast during those elections, and this time around there's only 1 ballot that has been cast, and it's been taking far longer compared to the August 8 elections. And just throwing my eyes to the results board at the moment, as it stands, about 232, I think it's 232 of the counties, of the 291 counties have already verified their results. The voter turnout stands at 42% of the 19.6 million registered voters, with Uhuru Kenyatta leading at 98% of that votes, with 6.7 million of the votes that he has been secured. And just looking at the voter turnout, which stands at 42.8%, Raila Odinga, in that interview with Sarah Kimani, which we will be airing in a few hours, also indicated that this was a vote of no confidence in Uhuru Kenyatta. And he says that the big question that lies ahead, and well, even if the IEBC announces that Uhuru Kenyatta has won these results, the big question that lies ahead is his legitimacy, considering that more than half, or less than half rather, of the registered voters have not voted in these elections.
All right, while we're talking about the votes and everything, Aldrin, let's talk about this. We heard from, of course, our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, saying that out of the 290 constituencies, about 229 have so far been accounted for. Talk to us about those constituencies, or rather the counties that were not able to vote because of the election-related violence. What is happening to them, because we do know that the vote has been postponed indefinitely?
Yes, it will be very important. That announcement will be made today by the IEBC chairperson, Chibukati, about what happens now. In a previous press briefing on the day of the elections, he made the announcement that the elections in those 4 counties will be postponed. But he also said that while these elections are postponed to Saturday, you can't indefinitely, continuously, perpetually suspend these elections in that area. They have afforded these people in these 4 counties an opportunity to vote, so they'll have to take a final decision. Tell you what's happening currently at the moment. We've tried to secure an interview with the Deputy President of the country, William Ruto. He had agreed previously to do the interview. However, though, there seems to have been an emergency cabinet meeting that is currently taking place. And one can only get the sense that probably from that emergency cabinet meeting that's currently taking place, that there will be an outcome as to the way forward. A very big issue has also been the security detail and the number of security that has been deployed around these constituencies, and the security really failing to ensure that these IEBC officials, whom Chibukati has said they have been attacked, he also said that they have been hijacked, to ensure rather their security and their safety, and to ensure that the voting in those 4 counties does go ahead. So very tough decision that the IEBC has to make. One thing for sure though, Alicia, what I can tell you is that no matter what happens, no matter this outcome, there will be a court application to overturn these elections. There are already 2 applications sitting at the Supreme Court. One of those applications is to try and interdict Chibukati from announcing these results, while on the other hand, an MP from Jubilee Party has also countered that interdict to ensure that Chibukati announces the results, also taking into consideration, of course, that the Constitution of Kenya says that when the announcement is made of the results of all 291 constituencies must be made. Now, what happens in this case where you have these 4 counties that haven't made their ballots?
All right. Now, Aldrin, another thing I picked up from Sophie as well is that she says that the AU has now suddenly become intricately involved in the situation in Kenya. Maybe basically outline their role. What exactly are they doing? Because we haven't seen them right from the beginning of this impasse.
Well, actually, the AU was there during the August 8 elections. Remember that they were being led by former President Thabo Mbeki, well, South African former President Thabo Mbeki. And after the Supreme Court ruling on September the 1st that nullified the August 8 elections, a lot of aspersions had been cast then on the observers, because the observers had given those elections a clean bill of health. They said that the elections were credible. They didn't indicate that the elections were free and fair. They veered, they stayed away from making that declaration. And that's why this time around, when Sophie, as well as the other media houses, tried to speak to Thabo Mbeki on the day of the rerun of the elections on Thursday, he stayed away from declaring how these elections have been run. He indicated that it was too early to make an announcement on how these elections have been run. When we were in Kisumu yesterday, this is a county that has massive support, which is a stronghold of the opposition party, NASA, the opposition coalition alliance. They've indicated that Thabo Mbeki, quote unquote, has failed the people of Kenya by making their pronouncement that gave some level of credibility to the election results or the electoral process of August the 8th. And this time around, they wish that there will be a fair and sensible approach to what has been happening. And as I've indicated earlier on, when you look at the EU, the European Union's Observer Commission, Electoral Commission's leader here in Kenya, Mariki, in an interview that she gave to the Dutch media house, where she said that these elections have already failed. So quite an interesting take from the EU, quite a bold statement from the EU. We'll have to wait and see how the AU responds to that and what the AU's observation has been of these elections.
All right, now Aldrin, just to take you back to your earlier point there, that you mentioned that there are already 2 court interdicts that could potentially bar the announcement of the results of the rerun of the polls. I mean, what happens then? What would be the next step for the country to do? Say, for example, these elections had to be nullified. Do we then go back to court and having the court to declare? I mean, what is the process that's going to be like that will be unfolding?
The Constitution is clear that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter when it comes to disputes of this nature. And that's the reason why, even during the August 8 elections, after the August 8 elections, NASA went to the Supreme Court, which nullified those results. But the Constitution is also clear that the results must be held within 60 days of the elections, 60 days of the Supreme Court or the Supreme Court's announcement or ruling about these results, whether the Supreme Court nullifies that results. That means that the elections must happen within 60 days. And that's why there was this rush and this push to have these elections take place before the end of this month, because the 60 days would have lapsed, considering that the ruling was made on the 1st of September. So this is a huge issue that Kenya is facing. Even before this court ruling, even before the elections rather, ahead of the elections, there was a court application to try and stop these elections from going ahead. One of those court applications was at the High Court. However, the High Court made the announcement and made the ruling that the returning officers at these 291 counties, their employment or their appointment was illegal. But then the IEBC then went to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and they successfully appealed that ruling, which meant that the elections could go ahead. And the argument that the appeals court gave in their judgment was that if the elections do not go ahead, it means that Kenya could face a constitutional crisis, because the Constitution is clear that after a ruling on the final results on the elections, that the rerun of the elections must be within 60 days.
Thank you so much, Aldrin. We'll definitely touch base with you much later on with a sound update of what's happening out there in Kenya for those elections. That's our reporter in Nairobi, Kenya, Aldrin Sampear, looking at the current situation after the results, the election results. We will continue to give you more updates on the situation on the ground at every top of the hour.